website at tokyostationpens.com, on Instagram at tokyostationpens, and on Twitter at tokyostationmnh.
Hello, my name is Akane. You can't find me on social media, unfortunately, because I'm private.
Yeah, that's right. You don't have a social media presence, but still, I think through me, you are quite engaged with the stationery community.
Yes.
So yeah, for those of you who are listening right now, obviously Jacob is not here with us today. He's taking a break for his studies. He's studying for an exam, so he won't be joining us today. So instead, what I thought would be interesting is to bring a very special guest. Now, Akane has obviously already introduced her name, and I just want to give a little bit more of a background in the sense that we are a very niche podcast, and we talk a lot about things that are very specific to, I think, people who are already in the hobby. But I think one thing that both Jacob and I lack in perspective is how, let's say, non-collectors or how casual Japanese users, let's say even, regular Japanese people, how do they consume and perceive the kind of stationery market here? Are they aware of the kinds of variety, and are they aware that this is not something that is prevalent all across the world? So I thought it would be interesting to bring Akane into the podcast to talk to us about this. And so that will be the meat of the podcast today.
Yes, I'm your run-of-the-mill Japanese local citizens that you can just throw a rock in the street, just hit anyone, and that will be me.
All right. So, but before we start that, I'd like to read some reviews. Do you mind if I read some reviews?
Go ahead.
Okay, so as we've been talking about in the past few episodes, we do put a lot of time into the podcast, and running a podcast is not free for us. Obviously, the content is free for you to listen to, but on our side, we do have running costs. Equipment, we have a server cost, etc., etc. So it does cost a pretty penny. Now, while there's no direct way for you to contribute to us if you like our content at the moment, there is a way for you to pay us. And that way for you to pay us is rate, review, subscribe. Now, you've heard this on all of your podcasts, but it's true. It works. That's why people talk about it. And, we've got a lot of reviews, and I would encourage you, if you like our podcast, to also maybe when you have some time, drop a review. Tell people why you like the podcast, and help us spread the word. Tell a friend, tell a family member. So, with that said, let me read two reviews today. So, the first review that I want to read is our only review that's not a 5 out of 5. So, this review is by Bill Wilkins Ghost, and the title of the review is Pens Not Politics, thumbs down. So the review says Pens Not Politics, thumbs down. He gave us a 1 out of 5. Thank you very much, Bill Wilkins Ghost. I assume you are referring to our episode where we made a call to stand against police brutality. And I guess if that's political to you, I don't know. I guess you're just very lucky not to have to think about that. So, feel free to not listen to this podcast because, we do have people who are affected by politics and who aren't as lucky as you. So that's our 1 out of 5 star review. And the others are all actually 5-star reviews. So I'm very grateful for that. And I want to read a review then by Alol4716. ALOL 4716. Alol4716 says, "Fantastic podcast. This is a must listen for anyone interested in stationery. CY and Jacob provide informative takes on nearly every type of stationery you can think of, as well as what the Japanese stationery scene and market is like. My favorite parts are when they talk in detail about the people, vendors, makers, influencers, behind the products that we love, and how their stories have helped shape the things we consume. So that's very nice, Alal 4716. We do try to bring as much information as possible, especially the kind of things that we think might not typically be accessible information wise outside of Japan. And I think, us being situated in Japan, we do have a unique view onto the market. So thank you very much, Allah 4716. Now, for the rest of you who have not given us a review yet, please do consider giving us a review. I know that it's obviously a hurdle. It takes some time to write out a review, but it would really, really help us. So if you're like Allah 4716 and you like our podcast, please do consider leaving a review. Or if you're like Bill Wilkins Ghost and you don't like our podcast, DM us privately, or leave a review, and maybe we'll read it out loud and give you our thoughts about that. So, now with that out of the way, I want to get into the heart of the interview right now. Kind of skipping the regular acquisitions part of our podcast. Now, I know you said that you're kind of the run-of-the-mill Japanese person, but that's not really true, is it? Because you've lived abroad a significant period of your life, which is not something that regular Japanese, not regular Japanese people do. So I know you told us a bit about who you are, but give us a little bit more information. What do you do for a living? What kind of stationery did you grow up with?
Okay, so I am born and raised in Fukuoka, which is a southern city of Japan. It can be quite in the countryside, but I lived in quite the urban area of Fukuoka. And I just grew up with a lot of local influence, and I grew up going to public schools. So I had a lot of just really casual, stationary culture around me. Actually, I lived in the United States from when I was 6 to 8 years old because my dad worked there. And I just lived there for 2 years and came back to Fukuoka. I spent I spent most of my education there up until high school, and then I decided to go to a university in London for 3 years and a foundation course, so that makes it 4 years.
Yeah, so let me just pause you for a bit because, we've already gone into, you said that you're kind of a typical Japanese, but then, you've led this atypical experience in Japan. So I want to get to the early years, because you mentioned that you lived in the U.S. for a few years, 2 years, I believe it was. Do you remember much of it?
Yes, I do, actually. I remember a lot of really, I mean, your whole childhood consists of going to school, spending time at home. So I remember a lot of stationery around me, especially because I had to study Japanese. I had to keep up my Japanese skills for when I went back to Japan. So I would have a lot of paper and a lot of study drills around me.
Okay, so you or your family, I guess, brought those from Japan to the U.S. or?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, my mom imported a lot in her suitcase.
And where were you living in the U.S.?
I was living in Cleveland, Ohio, and Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay, so not a huge Japanese population there.
No, very small.
Yeah.
Very small.
And do you remember the kinds of stationery that were available in the U.S. while you were there?
I think it was. I remember. I guess half of it. I think. But a lot of it was like just your very 90s typical pens and paper. All those Crayolas, all those like Elmer glue and all that. I think I was lucky enough to have access to all those things at a local shop, but also my mom was very into me drawing and like creating crafts, so she was very excited with me to pursue some of my hobbies back then.
Yeah. And so, moving from your childhood in the US and then coming back to Japan. So you mentioned just now that you would go to the local stationery stores in Jacksonville and Cleveland.
Yes.
When you came back to Japan, when you went back to Fukuoka, which is it's not a small city, but it's not a huge city, I would say.
It's I guess it's like the fourth biggest city
Yeah.
in Japan. Not a lot of people outside of Japan are like
Right.
super fond with it. Yes.
Yeah. Were you aware when you came back that the types of stationery that you used were different?
I think yes. Yes and no, because for one, when I remember coming back to Japan and getting a whole set of crayons. So like in the States I would use like Crayola crayons or whatever. And in Japan when I got like this set of what we call koopies, it's like a crayon but in like a pencil form. The whole texture of it, like the usage, the purpose of it would be the same, to like color in and color lines and everything, but the whole texture was so different. I remember thinking, oh my god, I'm so cool now, like I have this whole set of new like colors to work with, and then everybody else had the same thing for our art classes at school. Yeah.
And when you make the comparison, did you feel like that was something that you liked more, the Koopy, or were you happy with the Crayola? Like when you had a choice, so I'm assuming when you came back to Japan, you probably still had your set of Crayolas. You had
Yes.
your set of Koopies. Which one would you use?
The thing is, I think a lot of Asians understand this, but it's a lot of like romanticization and of American culture and American icons, really. So at first I would be like, oh wow, like these Japanese stationaries, great. I really want all of them and everything. And then when you kind of like have access to it and you kind of have a certain amount, you start thinking, oh, I want something different. I want something like more pop and like more iconic, maybe a little bit. So like and then all those Crayolas look cool all of a sudden.
Mm-mm-mm. Yeah, so it's like something that other people don't have. So
Yeah.
it was kind of a thing that helped you stand out, from
Yes.
the other stationery, which were like, normal stationery, let's say.
Yeah, I guess so. And as like I grew older, the more prominent it got, because there's a lot of stores in Japan which feature import stationery and imported goods that have all these like shapes and colors that you would not really see in Japan, and then it would just look really nice like as like pops of colors, and then you would just start buying a series of it and there'll be like a flood of colors that you have.
Yeah, you know what? I sometimes see that in obviously normally if we want like regular office supply stationery, we go to local stationer, and the stuff there is great, but mostly it's a Japanese selection. But then if you go to these like hipster cafes, they sell like they kind of brand themselves as like a lifestyle company, and then they're the ones that are selling like Bics.
Yeah.
And those ones
Oh
that
my
they're not like very
God.
great stationery, but because they're from the States, that people kind of just buy them for the cool factor.
Yeah, it never looked cool until they just repackaged it and
Yeah,
just
like
placed it.
rebranded
Yeah.
Bics and stuff like that. Yeah, I totally see that. So I guess you've already answered my next question, but were you more aware that stationery in Japan was high quality, or was it just stationery to you?
I think everything was basically stationary to me, and the variation that is accessible, the variation that I would choose will be because I was living locally in Japan, it was like I had more choices. I had more things to look at, and because in the States we would just go to the local Walmart or like local stores, stationery stores to
Staples.
Staples to get all our equipment. But then in Japan, I would just like get on my bike and go to a 100 yen shop where they would have everything from everything including stationery, but the stationery section was so big. I remember thinking, wow, like if I could buy everything on the shelf, like I would just
Be broke.
I'd be broke. I'd be very broke in my based on my based on my pocket money. But then I would just be like, oh, I really want like all these series and all these like the pens come in 6 different colors, 7 different colors. That doesn't really happen in the States so often. So I remember thinking, oh wow, I have so many choices.
Yeah, I remember when I was in the States, we'd go to, CVS or Target or whatever, and there would usually be a section of stationery, but they would always be very like standard, I would say. So you had your Bics, you had your Pilots, like your Pilot G2, maybe some Pentel, but not so much in terms of like variety, especially of colors. So I think in the US, what I remember most, this was in Princeton, was red, black, and blue with standard colors. And if you were lucky, there might be green. Whereas in Japan, you have like oranges, pinks, purples.
Yes, pinks are big.
Yeah.
Purples are
yellows.
big. Yeah.
Yeah. And we've talked about this off the podcast a bit, when we were preparing for the show. But something that I found quite interesting and quite amusing is that, I grew up in Asia as well, and we had this. So in Hong Kong, when I was growing up, we would, obviously everybody would have their own stationery, but something that was really big were these pencil cases where they were kind of mechanical. So you would push a button, and so it's a big box, right? And you push a button, and the storage for the eraser, or in Hong Kong we called it a rubber, but so that compartment would shoot out, or like you'd push another button, and pencils would shoot out and stuff like that. Did you have that in Japan?
Oh yes, that was a very big thing. The rubber compartments and the pencil compartments.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like a luxury item for the kids. It's the biggest luxury item that you can have at school, where there's so many rules, so many things that the teachers set for no reason. And stationery was a big way to stand out from the crowd. So having a big elaborate pen case and having and actually in elementary school we were not allowed to use pens for some reason, because they were permanent. So having a lot of cool pencils and a lot of cool stationery was a social like status thing among us.
I remember that, obviously back then I think things were a bit more gendered than they are now, but the boys would use these like mechanical pencil cases, and we would use the compartment, and we would have our erasers outside, and then we would press the buttons to make the compartment shoot out to hit the eraser, so that it would be like a soccer ball, like a football.
I had a mean pen case.
Yeah.
Like that. I think I remember having a mean pen case. But my mom was thinking that it was kind of a waste, because everybody would like jam it every now and then, like just playing with it too hard, and the teachers would be really annoyed because they can't control.
And they're loud.
Yeah, they're so loud. Like they just like shoot out everything. They're just throwing everything.
Yeah, they're loud. They're huge.
No discipline. Yeah.
But it was very fun. It was very fun. But something that you said earlier, you said that was like the most luxury pencil or stationery item back then when you were a student. Did you have this idea of like, stationery as a social status, I guess, that, the cool kids have a certain set of stationery, and everybody would want to buy that kind of stationery?
Yeah, like a flexing kind of.
Yeah, it's like fashion.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, because all the kids would just just hop on bikes and just go to our local stores. It's kind of like the finds that you have in those stores that will just make you stand out and look cool. And I remember one of the first things that I got in the 100 yen stores were the mechanical pencils that looked like pencils, because we weren't allowed to use mechanical pencils at school. So the smallest thing that I could do was to get a mechanical pencil that looks like one. So like, you know, like you can just show it off, and people would have enormous pen cases. We would just like show off our stationery, and whatever we wanted to swap, we would swap. So like there were certain trade values to them.
Yeah. So like, you know, that kind of became, I guess, a social activity too, right? Like during your recess, you would, you know, talk about your stationery. Yeah. We definitely had that as well. My next question is more brand specific. I want to ask if because when I was growing up, we had our run of the mill, you know, Pilot G2, but everybody had that. So I was using the Pilot G2. I love the Pilot G2, but once I found the Muji gel pens, especially in the 0.7 size, because my handwriting is kind of messy, so smaller size handwriting, smaller tipped balls were not very good for my handwriting, so I really like the big balls. And once I found the 0.7, that was my ride or die, and I would just shop at Muji, and we had these Muji, and Muji obviously has a huge selection. For paper, I didn't really care too much, but for the pens, I really took that to be my daily driver, and the 0.7s were relatively rare, so that was kind of like my brand loyalty. In terms of how it is in Japan when you were growing up, you know, was that a thing, and people find a brand that they like and they just stick with it?
Yeah, I think people have their staple brand. I think I'm the opposite to you, actually, because I used to love very fine points, and my favorite were the Pilot High Tech C, which is a very like classical ballpoint pen, but I really love the colors and how thin they are. Basically, the thinnest that you could get was a 0.25. But I would just use the 0.3 all the time, and I just love how subtle the colors were, like the brown tones and the violet tones I really loved. And I love taking colorful notes, so it was a thing for me when I discovered High Tech C. I was like, I need every single color of it. And I think a lot of people, they either find it or they just like dabble in here and there, and it's the people who are very into it, you would know who that person is in class.
Yeah, and you know, we're now looking at the website, and there are 10 colors to the High Tech C.
There's a lot more.
Okay, so not everything is on the website.
No, this is just a distributor, so.
Okay, so which one was your favorite color?
Mine was I think it was a sepia-ish brown color.
Yeah, that's awesome. What about your friends, though? I mean, did your friends, is that something that you saw commonly across your social groups as well? That people would find something that they like and really just stick with it?
Yeah, I think especially when you're like a tween, or when you're starting off in middle school, people kind of try and establish a character with whatever possession they have. So stationery was a big part of it, with the school rules still being very strict as well. I mean, we would break the rules, but then stationery was a big component to that. So, and all the character stuff were very big, the Hello Kitty stuff. And all these characters that popped up in the early 2000s, like that was kind of our thing.
Yeah. So, you know, we've talked a lot now about, you know, growing up with stationery, you know, as a student in Japan, in Fukuoka. I want to shift the focus a bit to your move to the UK. So you've graduated high school and you've moved to the UK. When you moved to the UK, were you was it in your consciousness that that stationery was different?
Oh yeah, totally. I grew up in Fukuoka and during my high school years, I didn't really have great grades, but then I think I took beautiful notes. So I'm the type in class who uses all the colors that you would have in your pen case, and I'll learn a lot from it really. But like in when I started going to university, I just realized that it was kind of pointless to like have a colorful notebook, but like not really, just like it, not as long as like the class is going on and like everybody is trying to take notes. It's all to do with just having one pen and one piece of paper really for most of us.
Okay.
So
Do you think that that kind of idea stemmed because you found that actually having all these colorful notes didn't really help you, or was it because there just wasn't that many colors in the shops?
I think there were not that many colors in the shops, to be honest. I mean, I went to a school in a what we call the Zone 2 area in London, which is not central to the city, but it doesn't really have like nice. We didn't really have like the nice shops either, so we only had the shop in our campus, and it wasn't. They would just have the Pilot like Friction and the Pilot G2, not very much else. So I was, and also it was kind of, we were shifting towards the laptop and iPad stage, like in my years. So
I want to ask you also that, obviously the shift to digital probably did make a big impact. But you mentioned something that, because there's not so many options, there's Pilot G2s, maybe it was less fun, as an activity. It wasn't a social activity anymore.
It wasn't a social activity, and it was not about collecting certain items really. But also, one of the places that I really loved when I was in London was going to this franchise shop called Paper Chase. I mean, I would just go to a lot of vintage shops and a lot of crafty shops where they sell antique like ribbon or buttons and things like that, but and the street stalls. But Paper Chase had so many kinds of paper and so many kinds of like small business made made stationery that you would not see. In Japan, I think these small business stationery goods we lacked access to in Fukuoka, definitely. I didn't realize what I was missing.
Now that you talk about it, I've realized that, I lived in the UK for a while as well, and maybe the UK is more, I'd say, notebook and the notebook binding.
Yes.
Focused. They're more binding technique focused rather than new product focused.
Yeah,
right.
And they're beautiful. So.
Yeah. So you're in the UK, not a lot of options, but you had friends from all over the world, being that you were a university student. Did your friends ever ask you to bring them stuff from Japan?
Yeah, so I had some of my things in my collection, and then my friends would be like, "Oh, wow, where did you get it? Like, can I have one?" And and it would be very random things. And one of the first things were, I think, washi tapes, because they kind of started popping up when I was early in high school, so I thought I was kind of cool for having that. And then everybody was like, "Wow, I've never seen these before."
Right.
And later in my university years, they would have them at shops and everything, they would pop up. But I would give out washi tapes, I would give out some stickers, I would give out some pens. A lot of my friends didn't really know how to use friction pens. That it was kind of like that level. So,
but it was also quite new back then, right? Because I remember when I was in middle school, the friction pens were released to the market. So it must have been like, your high school or just the end of your high school.
I think mid high school. Yeah, that's when they started coming out. So you work, even if you have like one pen and one notepad for class taking notes, having a rubber
Yeah.
eraser on it is
And
pretty
that was a
big.
game changer.
That was a
right?
game changer, and
Yeah.
everybody was like, "Wow, the blue black is so beautiful."
Yeah.
And yeah, so
Uh, when people ask you about washi tape, that term doesn't exist in Japanese.
no
In Japanese we call it masking tape, but
masking
masking tape
tape.
is something different in the West, right?
Yeah.
So when they say, "Oh wow, washi tape," did you know what they were talking about?
No. They were like, "Wow, what is this masking tape? What? Why? How do you use it? Why do you use it?" Because I went to an art school, so everybody had access to the
Okay.
normal masking tape for their
Okay.
paintings or their designs, and no one had seen it with patterns. So they were like, "Wow, what kind of like, how do you use this? Like, other than masking purposes, why do you have to have a masking tape with decorations on it?"
Right.
And I just like put up all my like little photos on the walls of my bedroom with the washi tapes, and then they're like, "Oh, now I get it." And then I think the term sticked like very late in my university years.
So you mentioned that you went to quite an artsy school. Talk to us about the equipment there.
I think because our university was mainly it wasn't like a very high private school. It was more of a very open to the community, like very it wasn't
I mean, it's part of the University of London.
it's part of the University of London, but like it wasn't like very like we weren't the top of the top, like the rich colleges with a lot of supplies. We had to use a lot of reused material, like equipment and facilities. And the equipment, the stationery there was no exception, because I took some illustration classes, I took some animation classes. Everything was so standard, and I was like, where are all the stationaries? Like, I am like,
When you say standard, well, what are you talking about? You're talking about the like pilot run of the mill pilot ballpoint pens, Bics. So
well,
what are you talking
we didn't really even have access to those standard pens, let alone like paint and stamps and things like that. Like all the materials that you would have in the art room would be just basic,
like a generic
store brand that you can't even identify what it is, because someone's like torn the label off, and like you would have to create your own, basically.
Okay. So then in that environment, given that you brought some stationery from Japan, so I'm guessing that was actually a quite a big point of interest for a lot of people.
Yeah, it was like a very like social thing again, where people are like, "Wow, this is so cute! Like, where did you get it? Like how? Oh, I well, but then again, I had a lot of friends from overseas, from Asia as well. So they're like, "Oh wow, like look at mine, and like I have some stationery from Asia too," and we would talk about it, and yeah, and it would be a great like conversation starter.
So to kind of wrap up this section, your stationery kind of journey was social in Japan, but it was social in the classroom, right? It was social as you were writing notes or comparing with your friends. But then when you went to the UK and went to university, that no longer became the case. The social activity was kind of taken out of the classroom and more into your extracurricular kind of activities, like you said, decorating your room,
Yeah.
or maybe having a scrapbook. I know you kept some scrapbooks or some photo books that you decorated with the stationery that you had on hand. So it kind of became less of a in-school activity, and so in school you wouldn't really be using or be conscious of that anymore. But outside of school, it became social in a different way. Would you say that that's a correct assessment?
Yeah, when you put it in that way, it's really interesting, because I thought I was growing up with all these things, all these access to small stationery, affordable stationery around me, and collecting it was a big part of my life, and having that like kind of put into my personal box, really, to like once I started higher education, I didn't really have normal access to it anymore. It became a very private, but also just like a very like extended part of my social life, like as something totally different.
Yeah. So now I want to move to the part where you've graduated from university and you're now looking for a job. And it's kind of a stereotype for Japanese people to be very uniform and non-distinct, I would say. I remember when I was applying for jobs, it was funny because I wore a suit, but I wore a very, very dark navy suit. And I wore this bright blue tie with gold on it in this kind of laurel leaf patterns. And so I went to the Boston Career Forum in that. And, everybody around me had black suit, black tie. It looked like they were going to a funeral. So when you applied for jobs, and at the same time you had all this colorful stationery, this masking tape, talk to me about how applying for your job kind of affected your mentality.
Yeah, so first of all, I would say that your stereotype of what we say that is a stereotype is pretty true, because it actually is the case. And yeah, I also went to Boston Career Forum as well, and I was devastated. I was like, why do I have to kill my personality, just wear this boring suit, boring shirt? And everybody.
So you wore it?
Yeah, I got
Okay.
myself a whole set,
Okay.
and I was just running around trying to find the most plain suit that you can find.
Yeah.
In the UK, like I just went to like Next or something.
That's
I just
funny.
bought like a set. It was pretty hard.
That's
and
funny.
like it was like all these like kind of like liberal artsiers, and then like they were like, yeah, just go
Be yourself. Yeah.
go into the system, and now like your personality like doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
And going to Boston, it was interesting because a lot of girls wore really extravagant like high heels, like patent black, because like even patent is considered a little bit of a no-no in the Japanese like job searching community. So I was thinking, wow, these girls are rebels just looking at that. But like then like I have
Wait. Before we go on, let's set the context.
Okay.
I think most of our viewers, our listeners, probably don't know about the Boston Career Forum, but it's this one weekend in Boston where Boston becomes Japan.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
So strange.
And there's literally like thousands or tens of thousands,
yeah.
of students from all over the world descend into Boston. And I think that weekend I only heard Japanese.
Yeah, I flew in from London, and I was like, I did not know I came back to Japan.
Yeah.
It was that many, like all the clam chowder restaurants were filled with Japanese students.
Yeah.
So
for sure,
weird.
For sure.
But yeah, so basically like I brought like little bits of like of the trinkets that I would have like as a part of my stationery package. Like I had a small bag, like it was like 2 handfuls of basically the stationeries that I would usually have, but then I would have no opportunities to use it, because all you would use are black signo to write your CV, handwritten. Everything has to be handwritten. I remember writing like 10 sheets all in Signo, and now I hate Signo.
I remember that. I remember that because even in my time not so long ago, when you applied, we had the opportunity to actually fill in a digital application already.
Oh no.
So we didn't have to do everything by hand, but some companies would still require you to write not just your CV by hand, but also they call it the entry sheet, which
entry
is
sheet,
your
yeah.
application. You had to write that by hand too. So there was a system where you wrote one CV and it got distributed to everybody, all the companies that you applied to, and then your entry sheet you'd have to write by hand.
It is ridiculous, and I was like, I was cursing so much trying to write it because they consider writing in friction to be rude.
Like, how many companies did you apply for?
I only applied for 2.
Okay, so you only had to write 2.
But I actually like had to prepare about like 10 to kind of like give in to like all these like recruiters around and like just pass it on. So
the average application for an applicant at the Boston Career Forum is 20 CVs.
Oh my god.
So yeah, poor children had to handwrite 20 CVs with Signo DX.
Yeah, I would see like Signo DXs empty, like they're just dead Signo DXs lying around on the table because everybody used it, and everybody just stole like a Signo DX from someone and just like wrote all their CVs with it.
I remember when I was at Boston, all of the stalls gave out these notebooks, these like really crappy notebooks, right?
Oh, yeah.
And there's kind of an expectation for you to take notes during the interview.
Yeah,
I would say, which I did.
Really? You did?
No, well, I took notes with my fountain pen because I was only using.
Okay.
I was only using
Fair.
my Mont Blanc, so that's another way where the company's like, oh, this guy is weird.
Yeah, I was like, I spent 3 hours last night like trying to write a full CV because I had to write. Well, we had to write everything in one go because using whiteout was a no-no as well. You couldn't use whiteout. So I was like, I spent 3 hours writing this CV so that it can be perfect. So why do I have to take notes? Like, why do I have to like further take notes?
But when I was applying, I specifically chose only the companies that wouldn't require me to handwrite.
Same, yeah.
Yeah. So, you went to Boston Career Forum, you went to Tokyo International Career Forum,
yeah.
and you eventually managed to get a job.
Yeah.
So what do you do? Generic is fine. You don't have to be specific. But what do you do for a living?
Yeah, so I've been working in the gaming industry for a long
10 years.
time now. Yeah, about 10 years now. And I thought that it was really like cool and digital and everything. Not knowing anything when I was in those career forums. Yeah. It turned out to be a lot more analog than I thought.
Yeah, I saw a picture of your office and it's something. Not your new office,
yeah.
Your previous one. But I want to talk about the office environment because that's where you spend the majority of your life, right?
Yeah. Sadly.
Yeah. But hey, when you go to work, your work is playing video games, so I don't want to hear about it. But what I do want to hear about is the kind of equipment that they gave you because in Japan, there's, I think as with most other countries in the world, you have like office stationery. There's like a bunch of stuff they can just take. So for example, in my office, we have a section of just, stationery. It's usually some generic, not so great stuff. But everybody just takes it from there and use it. Or in your company, how was that?
Did you guys order from Aschool?
Yeah, we ordered from
Oh,
Aschool.
yeah, same. So, I think Kokuyo runs it, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, we had like a supply from Kokuyo all the time with the generic office materials. And a lot of us would use the pens and the highlighters a lot. Lot of post-its, lots of post-its, because all our Gantt charts would consist of post-its. So.
Yeah, so then I think most office stationery in Japan is probably Kokuyo, right?
I would say probably yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Were you ever tempted to go back and use some of your more fanciful, colorful pilots?
Yeah, so I would have like a small pen case that is filled with all the things that I really love. I didn't know about the fountain pen community for like until very recently. So I would just like have all these like colorful masking tapes and some um and sticky notes that are shaped like cats' butts. Really, that was my favorite.
So you brought your own stationery into the office.
Yeah, I did most of the time.
Is it common to do that? Would you say?
I think to a certain degree, yes. When you're in some meetings and you just get like bored and you just want to take notes with the things that you really like, and it's one of the small joys that I think that a lot of people seek. A lot of people who are like engineers and people like that, they would actually have like their own like specific set of stationery that they would prepare on their own and be like, it's like kind of like your personal keyboard.
I want to kind of shift gears a bit and talk about planners. The planner industry is huge in Japan, as we know.
Yes.
We have, your run-of-the-mill, like, let's say Itoya has their own brand, Romeo. Maruzen has their own brand. There are, like, all of these generic planning planners, I guess. They're not even diaries, they're planners.
They're planners, yeah.
Right? They're, like, business use planners. And, every shop has them. Your convenience store has them. There's planner season. Actually, planner season started in September.
Yeah.
Which is insane because the fiscal year starts in April. So
Yeah.
that's like half a year early, right? So were planners are planners are they often used in your office community?
Yeah. So going back to when I was like in school, it was super common for us to just like go to the store every like end of the year. Like my mom and my sister and I would just go to the stores and like pick out the planner for the next year. And I think like even in your professional life, there's like magazines, there's like articles where they would pick up all these planners, they would just push it and be like, oh, like this year this is different, this year you can have this function in your planner. And so many people would just choose their favorite ones to work with, and I think people would have smaller weekly ones. People my age who back just remembering my 20s and now I'm in my early 30s, but you would have like small weekly planners with small stickers and small highlights attached to it so that you can kind of decorate your week basically.
And did you use any of these planners?
Yeah, I did. I actually, I wasn't a consistent user. I would dabble in and out, but I would have my weekly ones and my monthly layouts and just write in all my personal events that I would look forward to and just kind of decorate it.
And do you remember the planner that you used?
I'm ashamed to say this, but I used a lot of generic like import things.
So it was
in those
mostly cost as a factor.
Yeah, and it's also like the format that it came in. I think I really liked using Roban. And I just liked how it came in different colors and covers, and it's so casual, and like you can just like take it around, you can just like slap it closed with
and they're ring bound, so you can rip out pages, right?
Yeah, those were very like easy to use. I think I used about like 3 planners from them. I really liked it.
Talk to me about handwriting culture, because in meetings now we're still mostly writing notes by hand, and
Not me.
I am.
Okay.
But I noticed that most Japanese coworkers that I've come across have very legible handwriting. Like, even in English letters, it's very clear, very consistent, and quite tidy. And that's not what we see in the West. I would say like probably, I don't know, 30 to 40% of the people have illegible handwriting.
Yeah.
Right? So that's interesting to me because you wouldn't think that in Japan, of all places, that people would write so nicely and well in English.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it just has to do with our education, where, like, we grew up being graded on how beautiful, like, our handwriting is. And we don't really know the actual answer to it unless, like, you just go overseas and be like, oh, wow, like, I didn't know my handwriting was this good or this bad, or what. You don't have anything to compare it
It was
to
just
until
standard.
it was standard. Like, it
Yeah.
was part of filling in a test, and if it's illegible, you don't really get marks. You
Right.
can't get
Your
graded for it.
your teacher would just
Just
grade you 0 if they
yeah,
couldn't read it.
be like, nope, can't read it.
Right. So, for those of you who are unaware, we are dating. So, so you got into I don't know if it's fair to say you got into fountain pens, but when we first started dating, I got you a Sailor Pro Gear Slim, the
The Yuki-Tsubaki.
yeah, the Yukitsubaki. And that, I think, was actually not your first foray into fountain pens. You actually had something else before, right? You had the Kakuno before.
Yes. Well, that Yuki-Tsubaki is the most beautiful pen that I saw. Really, I was really blown away by how beautiful it was. I just like, because I have like casual interest in stationery, I would dabble in and out every now and then, and because I really liked using kind of sepia-ish tones or like a little bit of a watercolory color, watercolor like color, I had some kakunos, and I would just try some different inks.
Oh, you
with
had
it.
more than one.
I had two, yeah.
I didn't know that.
I switched it out, and yeah, I had it in my small pen case that I would take to work. And I also had like 2-3 brush pens as well.
Yeah. So I want to talk a bit about your return to the stationery hobby. That's been pretty recent, I guess. I got you this Sailor, 3 years ago. But for the first, I would say, year-ish after that, you weren't really into stationery. I think. It's really at the beginning of this year where you really picked up the pace.
Yeah.
And started really getting back into it. So I want you to talk about how your journey or your descent back into this stationary hole, this swamp,
Yeah.
your journey in that.
So, like 3 years ago when we first met, I think it was like on the second date or something when I noticed your fingers were like dyed like with your inks, like pretty red, like a maroonish color.
Yeah.
I
Was
think you were
purple.
using like
Yeah.
purple ink or something, and it half washed off. I thought you killed someone. Like I was like, what happened to your fingers? Like, why are they
Yeah,
bleeding?
you're like, are they okay?
Are they okay? Are they okay? I kept asking, and I was like, and every time he said it's okay, it made me more worried. To be honest, I had no knowledge whatsoever about like fountain pens and how the inks worked, and like I think after we started dating, you got a lot more into the fountain pens. Like you had your fair amount of pens, but you were living a very like minimalistic material amount like in your life, that you kind of had about like 10-15 pens that
No, I
you
had
would-
7.
Oh wow, okay. So you had about like less than 10 pens that you would just take around, and then you just went like headfirst, just dived into the hobby. And then I was like, what is this about? I was interested. I am interested, and I look into it, but I didn't understand the full scope of the fountain pen area. And I think just casually looking at it from the side and enjoying the whole how you experience it and how everybody else is experiencing it was very like intriguing to me, but I didn't think how I could fit in or how I could utilize like these fountain pens to kind of become a part of my stationery
Yeah.
life, my casual stationery life.
And I think that's a very important distinction because I think there are people who are interested in the pens for the pens. So that would be
Yeah.
me. But for the vast majority of people, you know, you want to know how to use it. And if it's just about the pens and maybe some paper, my notebook is very generic looking notebook, right?
Yeah.
So it's not fun, but we got you a plotter, and from the beginning of this year we really started to get into different ideas for using like washi tape,
Yeah.
and we went stationery shopping together, and actually you've really spent a lot of money now uh, on this.
Yeah, I mean, because when you're a student and when you have like 1,000 yen a month to spend on
Whatever.
your stationery as your pocket money, you really have to kind of like trim down and like edit and like just really just get really reasonable, like affordable essentials. But then once I just went back to like look at what I want to use and what I want to write with, especially like this year being crazy, like we were in quarantine for such a long time, and I just like took a look at like what I could get, and I was like, oh my gosh, like all these stationery variations, they were not with me back in my days when I was really interested in it. So like once I started getting back into it, I was like, wow, there's so many ways to use these
And
items.
this is cute, that is cute.
Yeah, and like what you think is cute really changes over age, and like all these like new discoveries of what kind, like all the not specific characters or not specific colors don't really draw to me, don't really speak to me. I really like exploring all these different designs and
patterns now, right? You're really into patterns.
Yeah, I love texture and patterns.
So tell our listeners what you're using. What's on the table now?
So right now I have the plotter that you got me. I really like the plotter because the refills are beautiful. And right now in the plotter, I have some journal. I have the planner that I'm not using
right, you
that
have
much.
A calendar.
The calendar, I have some journals going on, and also I have a pocket which can be attached to the notebook so that I can fill it with loose paper and loose little stickers.
Right. Right now you have mostly stickers in there, right?
Yeah, and labels.
Labels.
A lot of labels. And then I have some Mudzen flake paper stickers that you got from me as well. It's so cute. The Mudzen stickers, they have a little fountain pen and they're Athena ink lemon. The typewriter as well, and some letter
sets, yeah.
Letter set stickers, and I use this as well.
And stickers here are called seals.
Yes. Weird. Now that you mention it. And also I have multiple sets of kita, which is a washi tape, but it's in small tag forms, and they're kind of attached to one another.
They're like Post-its.
Yeah, they're like they look like Post-its, and I think it's very famous in the community now. Yeah. But back in my day, when I was a student, like they didn't have it yet, so now I'm getting back into it. So I can use these as Post-its. I can use these to label. I can use these to decorate, and I really, really love the kita washi tapes.
Yep.
Yeah, and then I also have the Deco Rush stickers, which are transferable stickers that come in different patterns.
Well, they're whiteouts, right?
They're shaped like whiteouts, but they, instead of whiteout, they're clear and they have pictures printed on it, so that you can kind of roll it onto your paper, and it would have this consistent like roll of illustrations that kind of pop out. You know my love for Pokemon, so I have the Pokemon 8-bit illustration set. I also have people sitting and resting set. I also have dancing girls set, which sounds so strange, but it's basically like cheerleader.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds strange now. Okay, dancing, dance.
Dancing girls.
Dancing girls, and then little stars, and these can be used for planners, and it can be used for letters. It can be used for note taking.
Yeah, so you just decorate your planners with this. It's super super cute. They're actually made by Plus, who we have talked about extensively.
And now I'm educated thanks to Jacob and thanks to you. Yeah, I love these deco rushes. There are so many. There are about like 30 plus, I think more kinds, and I just can't stop looking at them every time I walk into the shop.
And then you're writing a lot of postcards.
Yes. So my grandmother, who I'm very close to, she's been hospitalized and she's fine, but like I've been trying to kind of send postcards to her every now and then to really to just kind of brighten her day, hopefully. But she really likes it, so I'm sending some postcards that are made by the Esleet bookstore, and
It's a collaboration with Cupido.
Yeah, they're called Cupido, and they just make like very like whimsical fantasy-based illustration designs and illustration-based stationery designs, and I really love their collection. So the other time, the Esleet bookstore was such a great experience to just look at all their products and buy a whole lot from them.
Okay, now I'm looking in your sticker stash, and you've got a lot of stickers.
I don't have enough, though. I don't have enough, like, variety.
Okay.
Because there's, like, 80% of my stickers consist of dinosaurs.
I love that. Alright, so maybe we can close on a few listener questions, if you don't mind?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So we'll put a call out for questions on my Instagram. And I just want to ask you a select few. The first question that I want to ask you is a question from Agnes Manalo. His or her question, their question is, what is your paper preference? Grid/lines? And what about spacing size? Do you collect limited editions or limited editions from overseas?
So, I think as a casual user, I don't really collect limited edition papers, so I'm not that
Or even, limited edition products.
limited edition products.
Most of your stuff,
Yeah.
it's because I buy them.
Well, and that's because like they're at the front of the shops, like they're
Right.
they're just featured, and I get drawn to them. But I think that's an interesting question, because now coming to think of it, when I write in English and then when I write in Japanese, which is the only other language that I speak, I have different preferences. So when I write in English, I really love dot grids. They're my go-to. I think a lot of people know a lot more than me, and then they agree. But when I write in Japanese, I prefer a lot of the 3mm or the 5mm gridded lines are my preference. I think the 3mm I prefer that more. But what is interesting about it is that when you write in Japanese, you have different forms of character. You have the Chinese-based, the Chinese characters, and then you have the Japanese-based characters, which are hiragana. And in school, you learn how to space and how to fit them in a complete square. So the 4 grids would consist a perfect square for me to imagine how to place, how to write, spacing, and how to write each of the characters in balance. So I think the grids really help with that.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why, from next year we want to start doing Hobonichi, because their grids are actually dots.
Yeah, so they're so beautiful.
They're dotted grids, which, at least for me, that's like the best of both worlds.
Yeah, like the Hobonichi planners, I think with Quay's quiz introduction, we just got into it, but all the grids are just so like perfectly like designed so that you can enjoy it in any
Anyway,
language, that you prefer to write it with.
All right. So at Patachan from Instagram, he asks, "What's your one piece of stationery that you can't live without?"
That's a very, very difficult question. There's I think brush pens are the most important that I have consistently been using, because the brush pens, I like how they write, and also in important parts of I don't know, I think it's the same in a lot of Asian cultures, but in a lot of life events in Japanese culture, you use a lot of the brush pens. So when you go to a wedding, you have to gift a lot of money, and you just put it into an envelope, but you have to write your name in a brush pen. You go to a funeral, you give a little bit of money, and you just write your name.
It's
in
like a signature
different
book, right?
Brush pen. Yeah, it's a signature book, and you also have to write on the envelope as well.
Okay.
So kind of having a good brush pen is a very reassuring thing for all these important times. But also, you can use it in a very casual form, and you can use it like a calligraphy pen and drawing. It's so versatile, and like the quality, especially the quality in affordable Japanese stationery for these brush pens is just it's I can't imagine any better, really.
Yeah. So. All right. Maybe two more questions.
Yeah.
At Ameru asks, would love to know if they like any non-Japanese stationery, or what they think about non-Japanese stationery.
Yeah, so I really personally love non-Japanese stationery as well. Like, there's no difference really. It just depends on the product, on how it's presented and how it's sold. I think recently I've been looking on Instagram, and I've been getting into a lot of Taiwanese stationery. They're so beautiful. The designs are so like refined and so elegant. But I really like the American stationery and the European stationery sold in stores when they're repackaged and they look really cool. They're like pop icons that you get drawn to.
Less to use, more to like flex.
Yeah, more a lot of flexing. Yeah.
All right. Last question. Inky Toro asks, what do you think about the U.S. obsession with Japanese stationery?
I think it's quite remarkable. I think as a local Japanese, I think I've seen how MT, like for instance, has grown so much, and it couldn't happen if it weren't for overseas markets to recognize and appreciate the little designs that they have been doing. And I think it's really interesting how Japan has become this one like iconic thing, destination for stationery. And now when when people from the States visit, and they're like, oh, I want these stationery, I can have a lot of like we can talk a lot of things in common, and I can take them all to like all these stores that I really love, and we appreciate like all these like details in design, and just really like these very Japanese things that even Japanese people thought it was very like not cheesy, very normal, nothing special going into it, and making it special for us to like realize how it's nice to have those again. So it's been a really interesting turn, and I think it was just not recognized until until like these 10-20 years. And when I was living in the States as a child, no one knew what I had. I was the mysterious kid in class who has strange pencils. But it's so interesting to see how like everybody has recognized it and just appreciated it.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast. We really appreciate it. And, I speak on behalf of Jacob too that, really appreciate you coming in to talk about your experiences because, your perspective on especially the cultural side, right? It's something that is very hard for either Jacob or I to comment on. So again, we really, really appreciate you coming onto the podcast, and I mean, I personally had a lot of fun. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. And it's been interesting. And I've always been on the sidelines just listening to you guys talk. And I didn't know if was going to be as interesting or if anything close to interesting. But I hope that my perspective provides a little bit of the local culture here.
Absolutely. All right. So if you enjoyed this episode, you can find our past episodes by subscribing to us. You can find our website, and you can find a space for you to comment or discuss the episode on our website at tokyoinklings.com. You can find me. My name is CY. You can find me at my website, tokyostationpens.com, or on Instagram at tokyostationpens, and on Twitter at tokyostationmnh.
My name is Akane. You can find me somewhere in the Instagram ether.
But they can't because you're private.
But I'm private.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.